Engage your brain and enter the mind's eye. I'm your host, Brian Turnov, and you're listening to Z Talk Radio. It is September 24th, 2015, and on this edition of The Mind's Eye, you will hear the startling tale of one man's search for the truth. After inheriting the personal diaries belonging to his great-great-grandfather, who he discovers is none other than H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer. Our guest is Jeff Mudgett, author of Bloodstains, the book. And from his investigation of his direct descendant, he learns that Holmes' reign of terror was worldwide and not limited to Chicago as has been so widely believed. Based upon never-before-revealed historical facts, Jeff pieces together a dynamic and extraordinary puzzle, including the strong possibility that Holmes was Jack the Ripper. And Jack the Ripper is not the only controversial aspect of Jeff's investigations. His research may have found the fact that H.H. Holmes may have not have been executed as thought. In fact, he may have kept his reign of terror on throughout the world after his supposed death. In just a matter of moments, author and former lawyer Jeff Mudgett discusses his great-great-grandfather, H.H. Holmes, one of the most prolific serial killers ever. Right back with Jeff in just a few moments. This is The Mind's Eye for Z Talk Radio. We're back on The Mind's Eye, and before we bring on Jeff, we just wanted to take this moment right now to give you a quick update. We wanted to let you know our website has been redesigned. Check it out. It's themindseyemedia.com. Again, that's themindseyemedia.com. And while you're checking out our social media, why don't you swing by our other sites. We are also on Facebook.com/MindsEyeShow, and the same name as a Twitter handle, that's @MindsEyeShow. Right back with Jeff Mudgett, author of Bloodstains, the book, talking about Jack the Ripper, H.H. Holmes, and so much more. This is The Mind's Eye. Join us then. Welcome back to The Mind's Eye, and let's give a warm digital applause for my next guest, author of Bloodstains, great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer, and his name is Jeff Mudgett. Thank you so much for joining me right now, Jeff.
Hey, Brian. I've been looking forward to coming on your show. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure discussing this stuff with someone who I know cares about the issue. So let's have some fun.
And the pleasure is all mine, sir. It really is. And Jeff, it has been quite frankly a really long time since we last chatted. We first met in upstate New York at a paranormal conference. I believe it was Moravia, June 2012, a very, very long time ago. And for you, it's probably been quite a wild ride for the last 3 years. What have you been up to?
Well, a lot more the events and shows like that, but I've also been asked and done the talk at TED in Victoria in Vancouver. So it's moving along. We've been on History Channel. We've got Discovery Channel working on an episode now for us. So, it's moving up. We've dug into the world a little bit about Holmes possibly being Jack the Ripper, and where before, as you know, we were looked at kind of spookily. They looked at us kind of like we were goofballs. Now the world and law enforcement and the scientists are beginning to look at our evidence, and lo and behold, people are considering the possibility that he did, in fact, murder Catherine Eddowes, the number 4 of the 5 Ripper victims.
And I want to save the Jack the Ripper part for a little bit later, just because there's so much meat to chew on there. I want to dedicate a whole segment to it. And I'm so happy for you, Jeff, just because, like you said, you did a Haunted History, you did the TED Talk. There's been so much groundswell going on around Bloodstains, the book. I'm just really happy for you because it really couldn't have happened to a nicer person. On top of that, the book is excellent and it's fascinating in the most morbid possible way. So it was. I really appreciate what you're doing here and getting the truth out, and that's a big part of what the book is. Now, for the unfamiliar listener, just fill them in and who is H.H. Holmes?
Well, that's the name he liked to go by, but his real name was Herbert Herman Webster Mudgett, and he was my great-great-grandfather, which is easily handled mentally by my grandfather's grandfather. When I was 40 years old, my grandfather, at a family dinner, decided that the secret he'd kept from the entire family was too much. He was getting old. He was wondering about moving on, and he wanted to come clean, so to speak. And he told the whole family that our ancestor had been perhaps the most evil man that ever lived, the Chicago doctor, the serial killer who had built the murder castle during the Chicago World's Fair and killed hundreds of innocent victims. So we sat there in stunned silence.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that dinner conversation must have been like.
When I went home that night, I tried to handle it myself, and as I write about in the book, it haunted me for the next 10 years of my life.
And I really respect your choice that you made since you found out that decision. I think most people, Jeff, would, after they learn that they're related to maybe the worst human that ever lived, they would probably put their head back in the sand and pretty much just continue on with their lives as is. They would bury that secret deep down, but not you. You really decided to take it head on. Why?
Great question, and many in my family asked the same question when they knew I was writing the book. To tell you the truth, it took me 2 or 3 years to figure out the answer to that question myself. I knew I had to do it, but I didn't know why. It wasn't until later when I realized, listen, I didn't make a choice. This wasn't who I selected. I'd have rather had Abraham Lincoln as my great-great-grandfather. But I wasn't going to run away from it like my family before me for generations had done. It's not something a human being has to be expected to run away from, and I decided that the things I was reading, the stories I was hearing, quite frankly weren't the truth, and I wanted to get the truth out on paper, if for nothing else, then maybe to apologize to the victims of my ancestor who'd never actually even been investigated their murders by law enforcement. And I thought maybe that was something, how I could give something back. And you know what? It's worked out that way. I feel good about it. My family feels good about it now. And I get to meet people like you who understand that possibly they would have done the same thing had they been in my shoes.
I can't imagine what that dinner conversation must have been like when you first found out. And I imagine, like you alluded to before, that probably the rest of your family at first stuck their heads back in the sand, or at least tried to ignore what you were doing, or even really believing it. But then after I read it, they started to believe you a little bit. Was there a piece of information, evidence that you presented to them where they decided, this is too much to ignore, it's there and it's true?
My mother and father backed me up. My sister wouldn't talk to me for years. She wanted it to, just let it lie. You know what? It's like I said earlier, Brian. I didn't know how to answer the question myself to myself for 2 or 3 years. I just knew I had to do it. So, now looking back, I get to stand up on shows like yours or at the TED and explain to the audience, listen, my family's something which should be studied. We have the most evil genes you could possibly have as a human being, except none after him. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, my father, they didn't even commit jaywalking. They were perfect American citizens. They paid their taxes. They were law-abiding. They served in the military when the country called them, and there was nothing in our genes that made them be evil like this ancestor. And it was because of that I knew he was evil, because he had a choice, Brian. And I think science and I think medicine should realize it's not genetics, it's not DNA, it's not chromosomes. It's a choice a human being makes. This man could have been a Louis Pasteur. He was that brilliant, one of the highest IQs ever recorded at the University of Michigan Medical School. Instead, he selected torture and experimentation on innocent victims. So just for that alone, just to prove it is choice, it's not genetics, was enough for me.
Clearly, you believe that he was almost, I guess, not nurtured into it. How do you believe? Was he socialized into it, or he was just born pure evil? I mean, it's not a genetics thing, but when it comes to nature versus nurture, particularly, because he had a traumatic event in his childhood. He didn't necessarily have a bad childhood, but he had a traumatic event in it. Do you think that had any influence on him veering toward this evil side? He could have gone either way, and that's what pushed him over, or that just was an event in his life?
It might have speeded his decision up. I don't think it made the difference. And I tried to explain that in the book because here was a youngster who suffered the traumatic experience you mentioned. He was raped. And instead of going home to mother and father after the episode, he walked home, Brian, trying to figure out how he could use the ability to blackmail the one who did this to him, so that it was to his benefit growing up in life in the small community they were at. And I don't know about you, but to me, a 6 or 7-year-old doing that is an intellect way, way out there beyond maybe anything we've ever seen before. And that's why I wanted to write that in the book. This was his decision. He could have gone home, cried to mother, they would have gone and got the police. This man would have been arrested, put in jail, and Holmes would have been babied the rest of his childhood. Instead, he used it to take advantage, to start gathering the thing he loved most in all the world his entire life, money.
You said money was a big factor into what he was, not really into his killing, but it was a big motivation for him. Would you say that was part of his reason for killing, or that was just more of a benefit?
You know, I wrote about on your Facebook page about that Sympathy for the Devil song, and when the devil introduces himself to the listening audience and he says, "I'm a man of wealth and fame," I think Holmes thought that from the moment he was born, that he was an elegant, social animal that wanted the best of everything. And he knew that his best quality was being evil, and I think he just used it. Now, when people ask me why did Holmes do these things, you're asking me to give you my opinion why someone with an IQ over 180 made these choices, and I got to tell you, my IQ is not up that high. we're talking about half maybe. So my opinion and my answers to your question, you know, they're lacking. And probably for anyone to try to step up, unless we're talking about Einstein. And you know, and if for someone to step up and explain why Holmes made these choices, I would doubt the answers from anyone. He did these things. He wrote about them on some of his confessions while he was in prison awaiting execution. But I try to caution people when they read those. These were given to the Hearst Foundation after they paid him a huge amount of money, and this man lied his way through every one of those interviews. So I caution people when they read numbers and things and reasons why that Holmes gave, because he was still playing a game. He was playing chess. He was trying to line up that escape from prison, which I think he made.
This was a man of superhuman intelligence. He was a master manipulator. I mean, just evidence of that is when he was in jail, women still flocked to him and loved him, knowing he was a serial killer. I mean, he was almost like an evil doctor, almost like an evil Sherlock Holmes in a sense. It almost boggles the mind to think about him and the way that he manipulated people. Knowing that you're his ancestor, I want to get your perspective. Obviously, it's not a badge of honor to be America's first serial killer's relative, but would you consider it a scarlet letter? What's your prism and perspective on being his relative?
You know, I've never heard that. That's an interesting way to put it, the scarlet letter characterization. I've been that way my entire life. I haven't run away from the truth. I haven't run away from allegations or characterizations of my personality, my own character, and if it's something I think I can fix or change, that's kind of the way I've always been. That's how I practice law. and why I was successful at it. I got to tell you, I just didn't want to run away from it. It's not something I made a choice about, and I refuse to have someone, fault me for some conscious decision that this man made 100 years before I was born. And I just decided, listen, if books are going to be written, Brian, if movies are going to be made, I want to be there to make sure they're told the right way. And that's what I decided to jump into.
And I think what your book does more so than other books, it's really more of a character study than in the sense of the study of the killing. It really gets into your mind how much of a sick bastard this guy really was. For me, reading it paid a little bit toll on me, but for you writing it, I can't even imagine what that must have been like for you emotionally, physically, mentally. What was the process like, and how did it affect you? I know it had somewhat of a harsh effect on you as well.
It was agony. It was torture. When people ask me that question, I tell them, listen, if you want to go get the facts about H.H. Holmes, about the murder castle, go read The Devil in the White City. Go read The Torture Doctor. Go read Deranged. All three books are excellent books by great authors, all right? My book, Bloodstains, is the why. Theirs is the what. Mine was more about how the knowledge that I gained learning he was my ancestor affected me and those around me. More that than his. Now, I went back and forth in time, but I really, I explain that to people. If you want the facts, go the other way. If you want to learn the why, how this monster could have lived in America, in Chicago, our greatest city at the time, how he could have gotten away with murdering hundreds in a building that was made for murder. When they define premeditation, Brian, they should put a picture of Holmes and the murder castle in the book. Because here's a man that planned murders for years. He was never investigated for one murder in Chicago. And I tell you what, there's things that keep coming up about why the federal government bought that piece of property knowing what it was. The cemetery in Philadelphia that has his concrete tomb, which I'm convinced we need to exhume and do the DNA analysis to find out who really is in that grave. And those are the historical facts that I'd like to get right. And I to tell you the truth, except for 2 or 3 of my best friends, I'm the only one out there trying. Everyone else is pretty much just written Holmes off, except for making $1 billion in a movie. And I look at the big movie coming up, Brian, as my big opportunity for history to take another look at this evil monster who, strangely enough, and it's hard to believe still, he was an American citizen at the turn of the century, and we just kind of sloughed him off for over 100 years.
I think it's easy to, because that would mean that we'd have to put a mirror up to our own faces and our own history and shine a light and see something that is really dirty and disgusting that we probably want to just really continue ignoring. I almost get that in a sense, but I'm glad that this information is coming out now for his victims, for the voiceless that he silenced. And before you talked, you just said about the big cinematic news. We're going to talk about a lot of depressing stuff in a little bit. So let's talk about the good stuff for a moment. Share that big news, the cinematic news. Fill us in on what's happening.
Paramount bought the movie rights from The Devil in the White City. They're going to star Leonardo DiCaprio as H.H. Holmes, and Martin Scorsese's directing, maybe the greatest director there is.
Oh, without
They're
question.
going to make an epic movie, 3-4 hours, I'm told. They're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more money than ever been spent on a movie before. And I got to tell you, I think Leonardo DiCaprio is going to do a wonderful job. Now, the people that I have working for me with Bloodstains up in Hollywood on the cable side, they're telling me that the movie is in quote-unquote development hell, because anyone that's written The Devil in the White City knows that 75% of that book is about the architect Daniel Burnham in Chicago during the time of the World's Fair, who had absolutely nothing to do with Holmes or the murder castle. the author of that book knew, Brian, that unless he stuffed Holmes's murder castle in that book of his, he wasn't going to sell maybe more than 10, 20,000 copies. With Holmes in that book, he sold almost 3 million. Except now they have a problem because that book is not, that movie can't be about an architect that builds, 2 or 3 buildings and calls it the greatest event in world history. No one's going to go see that movie. They are going to go see the reconstruction of the murder castle and this monster in American history. So I'm told the script it's in its 4th rewrite. They're having troubles with it. Now they're trying to make Holmes and Burnham partners in some business venture in Chicago. And as Hollywood, they have the license to stretch the truth and history a little bit. And we'll see how that works. I'm not sure that's going to work, to tell you the truth.
But I think that obviously it's in really good hands at the same time. I mean, could they have picked a better director, Martin Scorsese, like you said, and Leonardo DiCaprio? I mean, he's going to clearly kill it. I love Leonardo DiCaprio. I am a little worried about the screenwriter. I forgot the person's name right now, but his past movies, I wasn't really particularly in love with. I mean, I think Captain Phillips was okay. It was solid. It was good, but there was nothing better, and I think that was his best movie. So I think that's kind of what I'm worried about. Yet at the same time, like we said, it's in Scorsese's hand, and it's such interesting material, it would be really hard to mess this up as a movie, as an engaging movie.
Wait a sec. I was under the impression, Brian, that he wrote The Hunger Games, which I thought was an amazing movie.
I thought the first one wasn't that good. I really liked the second one. I thought the second one really, and I don't really know the source material that well, but just as a viewer, I was more engaged in the second one, even though it was kind of like a repeat of the first one, just, I thought, better. I just found that the first one was boring. It didn't have the soul of the source material from what I'm told. I'm not impressed with him, but, it's an opinion.
What I always try to tell people is, listen, I had 5 years to write Bloodstains, okay? Rewrite, and rewrite. This screenwriter, has been given this difficult story to encapsulate, and he's been asked to do it in 3 hours about one of the greatest, most infamous mysteries in American true crime history. If he pulls it off, my hat will be off to him for an incredible job, because I don't see how you can do it. I really don't. I don't know how do you capture Holmes when he was a child? How do you capture him at the University of Michigan Medical School selling skeletons to pay for his tuition? How do you capture him killing contractors when they learn too much about the murder castle under construction? And then operating the hotel as these young ladies from all over the world came down into this torture chamber. I don't know how you do that in 2 or 3 hours.
No, that's why I think it's smart that they're probably starting around the World's Fair. That way they can kind of skip all that. Everybody is just, we don't really need to, not that we don't need to know that backstory. That backstory can almost be assumed or foreshadowed or not foreshadowed, given in other parts of the movie throughout it. If I was the writer, Jeff, this is how I would do it. I think there's so much material and he's so well known now that I think you can kind of make it into a 2-part movie. Make the first part about the World's Fair. Then if you were going to do a sequel, which I think would be smart, then the second one could kind of be like a detective movie, almost sense, tracking him down. What do you think about that? And then tell me how you would do a movie. How do you envision a perfect H.H. Holmes movie?
What a great question. Thanks, man. I want Bloodstains to be made into a series by AMC or HBO. That's my dream, all right? And that's what, I've got people working at selling right now. Now, as far as an epic motion picture, the way I do it, Brian, I'd start off in the courtroom with Holmes firing his lawyers and defending himself, and then doing the back and forth in time, do a kind of a docudrama with the courtroom, with him questioning witnesses, with him discussing before the judge and the prosecutor and the jury the murder castle and him stalking, innocents at the World's Fair. That intrigues me, with the audience behind him of his 6 quote-unquote wives crying alligator tears as he's let off after being convicted and announced that he's going to be executed. I think you have a wealth of information there. I think you have the opportunity to maybe capture most of the story in those 2 or 3 hours.
I love the sound of that. I think that's a great way to start and to tell that story. I really love that. Now, Jeff, as you know, most movies, they need to be wrapped up in a little bow. Me personally, I love those open-ended movies. One of Leonardo DiCaprio's, one of my favorite movies of his, is Inception, where they leave it open. This is how I envision it. I think if they were smart, they would almost take a cue from your book, which we're going to go into in a little bit. This is what I would see. I would see the last scene is him, they hang him, they bury him, they fade to black, and then a quick fade in and fade out, they see someone walking away from Philly or someone else walking away. I think that would be just, well, quite frankly, that would send chills down my spine if that was the way a movie to end with H.H. Holmes.
I think that would be Academy Award-winning stuff. I had that same concept about him watching the guards, making sure no one goes with that concrete hardening after the so-called execution. I agree with you. That would be, leave it open, let him walk away, and just watch the money come in funding the next movie about what he did after that. Oh, my.
Oh, boy, that's sending chills down my spine right now. Obviously, you're pretty connected, or you're probably a little bit more in the know about the movie. I know Scorsese's next film comes out in 2016, and like you said, it's in development right now. What's the latest word? Is there an expected date of at least pre-production? What did you find out there?
Well, they've got the new writer. They fired the Chicago writer that, I don't remember his name. He wrote the books about Sherlock Holmes, were New York Times bestsellers, 3 or 4 of them. He tried, they fired him, they have this new fella. So when he comes up with his script, the problem with dealing with giants in the industry, from what I'm told, is DiCaprio has to sign off on the script, Scorsese has to sign off on the script, 10 people at Paramount have to sign off on the script, and then the funders, the producers, have to sign off on the script. Then, once they sign off on the script, they give their changes, suggested changes and edits to the writer, who has to go back and redo it. So I'm told we're at least 2 years away from a movie, and that's if they started lickety-split right now.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Well, it's taken 10 years to get to this point, so I'm hoping it won't take another 10 years to actually get the movie made. I'm keeping my fingers crossed here. Obviously, with Scorsese and DiCaprio connected, I would imagine it's probably going to get pushed forward a little bit quicker than it probably has been. So we'll see, and I think it's going to be great. Have they asked you for consultation at all? Has anyone approached you in regard to getting your opinion or advice on the matter in regard to the movie, or not really?
And no, not yet, but Paramount has read the book. 3 or 4 of the executives there have purchased Bloodstains, and they read the book. I think the writer has read the book. So they're smart people. They're not going to do something crazy. If they need more currency in the film, they'll come to us and ask for help. I'm not sure what we do. I'm told at AMC and HBO that they think they could put a series together in less than a year and get it out.
Wow.
So there's rules in Hollywood, though, Brian. Paramount is a huge player, and the other big players, they don't want to upset people that have spent $20, $30, $40 million already, and who need to spend another $200 million on a big project. And so, there's a lot of politics going around. We're never going to hear what those politics are or how they're going to work. And, the fellas that I work with just keep telling me, just be patient, Jeff. How this works out, it's going to be good for Bloodstains, because people will want to know your story after Devil in the White City is told and showed up on the screen. So I'm just kind of relaxing, Brian. I go on shows like yours. I love to tell my story. I love to be able to discuss, issues and history with someone like you who enjoyed my story, and I'm having a great time.
That's the demeanor you really have to have. I mean, the truth is, as you know, and as you've clearly have experienced over the last couple of years, the entertainment industry is a fickle bitch. So one minute you're up, that's great. 1 minute, and then the next minute you're down. You just got to keep it calm and keep it cool, and I think you got the right perspective on it, to say the least. Let's go a little bit. All right, let's go a little bit more into H.H. Holmes himself, and then we'll dive a little bit into some of the more controversial aspects of it. Jack the Ripper, did he survive afterwards? But I kind of want to just give a basic foundation for the listener to work with, just so they have a better idea of how sick this guy was. And with most serial killers, they have a modus operandi, an MO of some sort. Holmes' victims, from my understanding, were mainly women and primarily blondes, but they did include men and children. To me, it seems like he was as much as a situational killer as much as an organized killer. What are your thoughts there?
Well,
and did he have an MO as well?
MO is a difficult concept to discuss about Holmes, because as we talked about, he was never investigated for any of the murders in Chicago at the murder castle. And when I go up on shows or events and talk about him possibly being Jack the Ripper, they throw MO at me. And I don't want to jump into Jack the Ripper yet, but I'm just using it as an example of MO, because I always turn the question back around on them, Brian, and ask them, what was Holmes' MO? And no one has an answer, because no one knows, Brian, not even law enforcement. There was no investigation to determine his MO. His murders were committed mostly down in that basement. Now, the 2 children that he murdered while he was on the run from law enforcement before he was arrested, there may be somewhat of an MO on them, I'm not sure. But when we discuss MO, we're discussing killers like Gacy or Bundy, those fellas whose MO is pretty simple, really. When you dig into those murders of those serial killers, law enforcement can come up with a very accurate MO, which led them to arrest this killer because of the style that they committed these killings with. We don't have anything like that for Holmes.
He's a really hard person to pin down through that prism of a serial killer, because, like you said, serial killers, I mean, we have FBI profilers who can almost nail down a person, but with him, his superhuman intelligence almost transcended profiling in a sense, the way I look at it, and that's what helped him elude prison for so long. After reading it, some victims he would torture for days and would keep alive, while others he would just kill instantaneously. And through your readings and through the diaries that you found of his and the grandfather's diaries, which talk about it, what made him differentiate and choose between these type of killings? Either to torture someone first, then kill him, or kill him instantaneously. What?
It's a great question. I really don't know. Now, when he was angry with someone, that was a given. They were going to suffer pain. There was no question. Now, he liked the experimentation of victims to see how long they could live under difficult conditions. He was doing that down in that basement, which is probably the most horrible aspect of all when you consider being in a hotel. Consider being a young lady. You're going to see the World's Fair, this event you've been waiting for years. Your family has helped you save the money. You've traveled from across the country or even from Europe. You're staying in a cute little hotel on the junction. The next morning, you're going to dress up in your finest clothes. You're going to attend an event with hundreds of thousands of people to see Tesla and Edison and the first Ferris wheel, anything your heart and your mind can imagine. All of a sudden, you feel funny. You're in the room. You're rendered unconscious. You're sent down a chute. You land on a gurney where you wake up strapped to this gurney. You're naked. There's assistants preparing you for the doctor who introduces himself and then commits carving on your body, experimenting the human condition, the extremes of the human condition. I mean, I don't know what could be more horrible. Maybe Auschwitz, maybe those places were more horrible. Maybe, prisoner of war in Vietnam or those places. But imagine the terror that young lady went through before she died.
so harrowing to even try and put yourself in those person's shoes. I just can't even imagine it. And it's terrifying. He killed for opportunity, he killed out of revenge, he killed for business, he killed for almost everything, it seemed like. To do so, you talked about his murder house. From my understanding, he didn't really come from a rich family. The Mudgetts weren't really rich or anything in that respect. How did he get his money to build this murder house? Because I imagine it would have cost a pretty hefty amount of money at that time, particularly because it took up a whole block.
Oh, he was a tremendous con artist. Like I said, he sold skeletons for his college tuition, then revenue after. I was at an event in Iowa, book signing, where a professor came up to me, one of the senior professors at one of the university's medical schools, and he wanted to tell me that they had seen my book, they had talked about it in a board meeting. They decided to remove one of the skeletons they had in their medical museum because they were certain that they had bought it from Holmes, and
wow.
Just the idea that some victim was murdered for them to exhibit the most pristine skeleton they could obtain bothered them tremendously. They were going to remove it from the museum. But he was also a life insurance fraud wizard. He would find a rich couple, Brian. He would seduce the wife. He was a master hypnotist and had hundreds of mistresses. He would seduce the wife. He would murder the husband. The wife would put his name on the policy. She obviously did not know he murdered the husband. She would put his name on the policy, and then she would disappear. And he collected, it's difficult to ascertain how many, but there was 1 year that some historians believe he made $300,000 1 year in the 1890s.
Wow. I mean, that's millions of dollars in today's money. Hundreds of millions, probably, if that.
Certainly enough to build the murder castle, yes.
Well, what's your opinion on this? Because he always gave differing opinions, particularly in that Hearst interview that he talked about. First, he said he killed 27 people, then 2, then 1, then none, whatever it was. Obviously, you couldn't trust the source, but they pretty much definitely know it was at least 27. Some say it's upwards of 200, maybe even more. Where do you lie, estimation-wise?
Yeah, the 27 number, I always try to tell people to, throw that number out. As a matter of fact, he recanted that number, but that was the number he gave during the interview with Hearst, and there was no basis in fact for it whatsoever. He admitted the same later on. Now, if you go to Eric Larson, the author of The Devil in White City, he believes it was more than 200. There has never been an investigation of the murders in the basement at the murder castle. There's never been a collection of DNA to ascertain how many human remains are there, despite them being there right now. We could determine a relative number. As far as an exact murder tally, I doubt ever. My opinion is, knowing that he owned a glass factory in Chicago that never sold glass but was in operation, that he owned a cement factory which did not sell cement but which had blocks of concrete dropped off in the Chicago River late at night. My belief, Brian, is that we're talking about many hundreds, if not thousands.
I wasn't expecting thousands. I won't lie to you. I was expecting high hundreds.
That's a huge number, which is hard to believe that
yes.
Law enforcement could have allowed that at that time. It's troubling to me. I saw the remains of this glass factory and where it was and how it was in operation and how he never sold glass there. And why would this monster have that piece of work?
Why would he spend all this money on these different type of cover-up businesses, this murder house? I mean, this is millions of dollars in today's money problem. Would he really only kill 27 people and spend that amount of money to do so? To me, that makes no sense. So the higher the number makes more sense because that's how much money he spent to do so. He wanted to make sure he was going to get away with this.
Yeah, 27 seems ridiculous. But let's assume it was 27. It's still a horrible number,
without question,
for that to have occurred in Chicago, in a neighborhood which was upper upper income. It was a nice area to live. Here's this. Imagine your kids are coming home from school. You're coming home from work. You go by this hotel. It obviously wasn't called the Murder Castle. And you see the doctor dressed. He's your family physician. He attends to you when you're sick. And he waves to you walking by toward your house. What a scene for a movie right there.
Ain't that the truth. Jeff, let's hold it right there. I want to take a quick word from our sponsor. It's just a quick break. We'll be back in less than a minute with Jeff Mudgett, great-great-grandson of America's first serial killer, H.H. Holmes. When we come back, we're going to talk about Jeff's visit to the murder house, or what's remnants of the murder house, and then the possibility, was H.H. Holmes Jack the Ripper? Right back in less than a minute. We're back on The Mind's Eye with special guest Jeff Mudgett, great-great-grandson of America's first killer, H.H. Holmes. And while we were on break, I was just talking to Jeff and saying how much I really appreciate the fact that he goes all out in talking about the book. A lot of times, authors don't want to give away that much information because they want the listener to buy the book. But you just go all into it, and I really appreciate that, Jeff.
Brian, I appreciate you mentioning that, because, and I got to tell you, what I try to tell listeners is, my book is about them stepping into my shoes, having been at that dinner party, having had their grandfather tell them this horrible family secret, and then deciding what they would have done faced with my decisions. It's not about how many people Holmes murdered. It's not about the knife he used killing one of the victims in London. It's more about how they would have handled being in my position. And that's what I try to get them to experience. When they do it like that, Bloodstains is a great adventure to go on. It's more than just another book about another serial killer.
It really is, and I couldn't recommend it higher. In fact, I'm going to have to purchase another one from you because I've lent out this one so much that it's practically in tatters. So, but I think that's a good thing. So expect to get a purchase from me afterwards. But let's get back into the murder house. That's where we left off. And before, we talked about how there's there seems to be a lot of groundswell with your book, and you've been featured in a variety of recent presentations and entertainment-related events. Particularly, you were featured on an episode of Haunted History, which went into, I guess, what would be the remnants of the murder house. Talk about that experience and what that was like.
Yeah, that was History Channel.
History Channel,
with their production outfit out in L.A. They contacted me and said that they would like to film my return to the Murder Castle basement, which is now a post office, the United States Post Office. The federal government bought the Murder Castle. It was never burned to the ground, as the other books incorrectly stated.
Huh.
The federal government bought the Murder Castle, knowing full well what it was, knowing what had occurred there, and without investigating any of those murders, which was a violation of federal law. As a matter of fact, before we go off onto the show, I want to tell you, I wrote President Obama a letter and his Department of Justice and said, hey, do me a favor on this. Let's do this right. This should have been done. It's a federal law. When they bought this land, they did the wrong thing. Let's fix this. Nothing came back. So I'm going to keep trying. Shows like yours help me. So History Channel called me and they said, let's go back down into the basement. You were there that first time. We read about it, in Bloodstains. And to tell you the truth, Brian, I told them no at first. I had promised myself I don't ever want to go there again. It was probably the most hair-raising experience of my life. When I went down the steps that first time into that basement, which was barricaded, the post office didn't use it because the employees thought it was haunted. When I went down those cobweb, ridden steps into this terrible, dusty, dirty basement with the original brick and tunnels still there that Holmes had constructed as escape tunnels in case the police ever came in the front door. I didn't believe in ghosts. I didn't believe in the supernatural. I didn't believe in God. When I came back up an hour later, and I tried to explain this in the book, Brian, I let my readers make the choice whether they want to believe it was my mental condition or it was an event, some type of energy. But I got to tell you, I believed in all three when I came back up those steps. So when History Channel called me, I told them no. And, they were offering me money. I said, no, it's not the money. It has to do with my sanity. Well, they kept after me, and they kept after me, and I finally agreed to do it, hopefully because I knew Harper's Magazine believes this too. They wrote an incredible article about that basement, that if ever the paranormal is going to be proven by science, actual evidence, it's going to be at that spot. And I knew, having been there, there is an energy there. It's not a ghost walking around. It's not a little girl on a tricycle. It's an energy that you feel pressing on you. And this energy is making your brain consider things you never would up in daylight. I knew there's something there. So we went back down. And to tell you the truth, it was a great show. They did a wonderful job, but I did not feel that same energy when that film crew followed me down.
That's how it worked with the paranormal, because as you know, I've had some experience with it. You can't say, all right, ghost appeared now, something weird happened now. That's just unfortunately not how it works. Energy, it gets trapped, but doesn't necessarily. There's certain things, in my opinion, that can release that energy, and certain amount of people or certain types of experiences around it can also limit it too. Because I watched the Haunted History episode, and I know sometimes they have a bit of some of the lines can be fed to you, and that's why I was shocked when, not to you, but they can feed them to people. That's why I was shocked when you said you started to believe in the supernatural and the God, because when we originally talked about 3 years ago or so, you really struggled with that aspect, with the supernatural part of this and the possible paranormal relation to it. And so I find it interesting that you've changed your opinion on it, which I think is a great thing. Everyone should. I just find it so interesting that before you struggled with it so much, and now you're pretty convinced of it.
Brian, I remember talking to you about it, and I remember explaining to you, listen, there's an energy that we call life. Now, when we die, I've never believed that energy simply is extinguished and goes away as if it never existed. There is something thereafter. Now, it's not a ghost. It's not that stuff that, history has tried to describe for thousands of years now. But there is that energy, which I'm convinced in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to prove, science is going to prove it. I was reading an article today about a new camera that makes 12 million shots in a second, all right? They're convinced, the paranormal crowd is convinced that camera is going to get their evidence that they've been looking for all these years. And I got to tell you, I called a couple of my friends and said, hey, let's get that camera and get down into that basement, because I think that camera might grab that energy. Who knows?
Wow.
But in the next 20 or 30 years, we're going to prove something stays here after we die. I'm convinced of it.
I couldn't agree more, and I take it from I look at what would Albert Einstein do. That's how I kind of live my life. And he talked about the law of thermodynamics. Energy can't be created, nor can it be destroyed. It can only be redistributed in different ways. So I'm a big believer in almost everything Albert Einstein did. So that's the way I view it, and I couldn't agree more with you. The fact that I do think that there is some type of life after life, or at least consciousness after death, in respect. And that brings us to another... excuse me, what were you going to say?
No, I just want to add, and I think we're going to find, when you have a place like that, 63rd and Walls, the murder capsule, Gettysburg, those horrible places where human anguish just was a tidal wave, that energy is going to be different than normal life. I'm convinced of it.
In that same episode, in that same conversation, you talked about how now you believe in God. And before, when we were talking about nature versus nurture, you firmly believe that he was, essentially, H.H. Holmes was born evil. How can you hold those two? Because to me, it seems like those are almost two conflicting notions and ideas, that you can both believe in God. People are born evil, which means God would have to have some control or some influence on that in respect. How do you hold those, to me, two contrasting ideas?
I don't know. I'm not a scholar of God or religion. I can tell you, my mind works like this. If I believe evil exists, if I believe there's an energy after life, you almost have to go the other side, Brian, and believe that there's a God. it's very difficult for me to believe in those two without the other, the opposing force. So while that may, I hope I haven't upset any of your listeners, I hope I haven't insulted any of the highly religious ones. To me, that's how the equation works. There must be something at the other end of the spectrum.
It's almost like a yin and a yang. If there's a God, if there's a good, then there has to be the opposite, a devil and evil. I think we're kind of in the same boat there. And
I agree.
And Jeff, I wouldn't worry about insulting our listeners, because I insult them pretty consistently. I think they come here for that abuse, so they're used to it by now. All right, Jeff, let's get into a little bit more of the controversial aspects of your book, Bloodstains, the book. Again, we're with Jeff Mudgett, great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, author of Bloodstains, the book. And in your book, in the research through your diaries and in your investigation into H.H. Holmes, you came across some startling information and possible connections to Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes, possibly the same person. And originally, I thought you were pretty much going out on a limb, and maybe, Jeff, a little crazy, quite frankly. But after reading the book, you really do present some strong evidence. Go into the connection there between, was H.H. Holmes Jack the Ripper and Jack the Ripper H.H. Holmes?
Of course, and I got to tell you, I've done 3 shows now, the TED, a huge event up in Michigan, and another in New York, where we swear the audience in. I go up as prosecutor, as I did, when I practiced law. We present the evidence, and then we have the jury vote on that evidence, whether there is probable cause or even beyond a reasonable doubt. At the TED, we had 3,000 people there, lawyers, doctors, scientists, professors. We had an incredible array of screens to present the evidence to the audience. We had 77% come back in our favor when we put the vote to the audience. So I'm convinced, if you gave me that evidence, this evidence I have now, and you allowed me to conduct a current murder trial of a current suspect, of a current victim, I could get a conviction with this evidence. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, the thing that has caused so much confusion, Brian, over time about Jack the Ripper was the media commotion that was created. It's a phenomenon. It's a media phenomenon, Jack the Ripper. What I try to explain to my audiences is this: Holmes killed Catherine Eddowes, number 4. He did not kill the first 3, or probably not the 5th. When I talked to the people at Scotland Yard, they've agreed for decades that there was at least one copycat, probably 2 of those 5 murders. So when an author comes up, Brian, goes on your show, and says, I can prove who Jack the Ripper was, well, the questions start rolling in about M.O. The questions start rolling in about different forms of evidence. The questions start rolling in about different characteristics of each killer relating to each specific murder. And lo and behold, it doesn't work. And that's because we've tried to force those 5 murders into one man who didn't exist. Now,
let me just get you. The reason why that is because the forensic expert at the time who did the did the study of the bodies, he's the one who concluded that all the 5 were done by the same people.
And he made a mistake. I can tell you that. And listen, when we had I have stuff come in every week, Brian, about Jack the Ripper and Holmes. Interesting material, new material. That's why I just hold my breath. I'm getting new evidence almost every week from people around the world now that they've seen our presentation of the evidence. We had an article go out, a Philadelphia paper, that went around the world almost to any English-speaking nations, and the responses coming back are just amazing. We had a surgical nurse who did transplants for 2 or 3 years, and she said, it was a quote a couple 3 days ago. She said, "You're absolutely right. I did this for 3 years. There's no way someone could have removed a kidney or liver without damaging it without being a surgical expert. So when you have facts like that, when you know the pathologies and the evidence, you and I can get into in a little bit, but you know those 100 suspects that we have, that these authors have put forward, you eliminate 2 or 3 right there. If they're not a surgical expert, they weren't Jack the Ripper. And it's time that the world accepts. You've got to use the evidence you're given. We're not going to have a video of who Jack the Ripper was, never. We're not going to have DNA evidence. That stuff about the shawl was all a hoax. We're going to have to use the material we have, and that's what I've been trying to do.
And the one that I talked about before was that the doctor said that it was definitely done by the same person, all 5 by the same person. So I try to use the evidence that we do know, and here's the doctor who looked at his studies, came up with opposite conclusions of yours. So, for me, it's hard to, because you present great evidence, and then we're using the evidence that we do know. How do we combine the two and come up with a happy medium? Obviously, you're going to stick with yours.
I don't really know I'm sorry, when you go to the pathologies and you read the comments from the experts, the official doctors at the time inspecting the victims, their comments were that the murderer was a medical expert. Scotland Yard came to that conclusion in their book. So I'm not quite sure that the opinion you're getting from this doctor, I'm not aware of it.
Okay, well, his name was Thomas Bond, so look into it. He looked at all the forensic expert at the time,
Okay.
So let's play devil's advocate, and obviously when I say that in this episode, I mean that in the most loose term possible. You, in your TED, actually, before we get into that, just give out where people can actually look at your TED. Don't you have it online? And also give out your social media information before we go into this a little more.
Yeah, you can go to www.bloodstainsthebook.com. And I think my manager has the TED talk I gave on the front page, the home page. Click it up, and you can see me present the evidence to the crowd, and then take the vote. The host that came out and helped me, it was the first time the TED ever did this, which was quite an honor. We handed the audience electronic devices. We stopped during my presentation to take questions. They'd never done that before either. And then we took the vote after the evidence was presented. And your listening audience, if they go to my website, they can watch me give the talk. And let me warn them though, that was probably the most nervous I've ever been giving a talk in my life. You walk out on the stage after coming in the back, and it looks like NASA launching a nuclear rocket, because there's 100 fellas back there running computers and screens, and it's whirling and whizzing and smoking, and you walk out, and there's this fella that gets in your face. He's the producer, and he starts giving you orders, and your minutes are going out on the stage. They got teleprompters at your feet. It looks like you're President Obama with teleprompters, and the screens are behind you, these huge screens. And he tells you, do not turn and look at the screens behind you. If you do, I'm going to pull you off the stage. I mean, he was like giving me these orders. So I walked out there, and the teleprompters are there, and this auditorium in Vancouver is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. The seats go straight up to the sky in front of your face, and you walk out on this little pier, and you can almost touch all those thousands of people. It's terrifying. And I walk out, and I start talking, and they start presenting my evidence, and I'm looking at the teleprompters, and the audience is not reacting to my talks with the teleprompters. So I turn around and look at the screen, and they're 2 minutes off. My teleprompters are 2 minutes off my screen. So I pretty much just told the guy he could kiss I just started using the big screens behind me, and so I got to let your listening audience know, when you watch my presentation of the TED, give me a little slack on that.
It definitely is still worth it, to say the least. In the TED Talk, you play the role of prosecutor. I want you to do the other side. Be the defense attorney. I want you to eviscerate your own case. Poke holes in your case. If someone came to you as a defense attorney, I want you to say, you know what, there's no way. How would you do that?
Well, I'll tell you what I get asked, and it's a good question. Prove Holmes was in London the day of the murder. Okay. It's a good question. It's something I'll never be able to present a photo of Holmes in London. All right.
Of course not.
What I can do is prove he wrote the Dear Boss letter. What I can do is prove he wrote the Saucy Jack postcard, which, with the postmarks, make it impossible for him to have written both without being in the UK. You couldn't have written it in the United States and having it travel across the Atlantic in 8 days. It would have made it. We also know that when the Dear Boss letter was sent to the London media, Scotland Yard and the London Metropolitan held the letter. They wouldn't let the London papers present them to the public. They wanted to see if the material in that letter describing the next victim's condition would come true. When the body was discovered, the victim was murdered 2 days after the letters were delivered to the paper, all right? Her ear was missing, just like it said it would be in the letter. So, Scotland Yard and London Metropolitan presented a poster which they plastered around Whitechapel. We have a copy of it in my website, which your listeners can view. And London Metropolitan states in this poster, anyone that knows who wrote this letter, get in touch with us immediately. They then let the London media present the letter on the front pages of the paper, which is where Jack the Ripper truly began, and I'll tell you why. Dear Boss was the first time the letter was signed Jack the Ripper. That phrase had never been used for the 3 previous murders, okay? Not by the media, not by law enforcement, not by anyone. It was the first time then. So that when it went out on the first page of those papers, Jack the Ripper was created, and that was the media phenomenon which the papers used to sell more copies. Absolutely true. So, when that letter was put forward on the front pages, 2 days later, the postcard, the Saucy Jack postcard, was delivered to the papers, and he describes the media sensation in the postcard and that letter. When you write down in outline form the dates involved in the body, the first delivery of the letter, the first present on the paper, those things, the poster by Scotland Yard, you can see there is absolutely no doubt, and Scotland Yard believed it at the time, there is no doubt that the author of that letter was Jack the Ripper. He killed Catherine Eddowes. So that's enough for me. You give me that in a current murder trial as prosecutor, and I'll get a conviction. Plus, we have the computer composite, which in 2006, Scotland Yard and the BBC took the 13 eyewitness testimonies. Most people don't know that. There were 13 eyewitness testimonies of what Jack the Ripper looked like. They put it into the computer that came out with that composite, which I have on my website again. We put it up on the screen at the TED, and we compared it with a frontal photo of H.H. Holmes. When I took that composite and the photo to an FBI agent that did that for a living, compared composites with photos, he was amazed that the nose was broken at the bridge in the exact same location. And Brian, when you go back onto my website, take a look at that nose.
Yeah, I saw the picture. It's
uncanny.
When you start
adding these things up about him, the age, the weight, the size, and then the letter, it becomes a pretty easy conviction as far as that one murder, not the other 4, and I try to let my audiences know that.
That's an important aspect of it. You're not trying to say he was responsible for all of them, but we definitely, for this specific one, which you can trace all that evidence to, it is strong evidence, to say the least. And look, when I first saw that composite, where you superimposed him on the composite, it was uncanny, the similarity, to say the least. And I know I only have you for a few more minutes. I know you got a lot more to do tonight, so let's fast forward just a little bit and talk about his capture and his arrest, and maybe the even most controversial aspect of this, if he survived. I think one of the greatest ironies maybe in the last 150 years is the fact that H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer, maybe, like you said, killed upwards of, maybe a few hundred, if not 1,000 or so, thousands. He was only convicted of one murder.
It's sad, and it's perhaps the most disappointing aspect of the the American justice system at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Except that they obtained a conviction of this obvious killer, and they thought they executed him, which we'll find out one day as soon as we exhume that his tomb in Philadelphia and do the DNA analysis. But I still think, Brian, and with shows like yours, you help me. I still think we have the opportunity to do the right thing and investigate those grounds at the post office now, 63rd and Wallace, determine the DNA of those innocent victims and do the right thing. So, I'm going to keep pushing. That's what I wanted to do. And the fact that we never investigated one murder that occurred there is, sometimes I think that's my destiny, why I was supposed to write the book, Brian. If you let me go a little mystical on you.
Please do.
Maybe that's why I was supposed to write the book, so that we do the right thing for those innocent young ladies.
There's a lot of voiceless in this case, and their voices have been silenced by your great-grandson, your great-great-grandfather, and I think it's only apropos that you're the one who at least can give them somewhat of a voice, and appropriate, I think, in a good way. We talked about how he possibly survived, because, all right, so let's lay it up here. He was arrested in Philadelphia in what year, Jeff? You remember offhand?
Yeah. Excuse me?
When was he arrested exactly?
Oh, see, that's one of the ones we need to go to Devil in White City. I don't think he was arrested in Philadelphia. He was arrested in Toronto and then extradited to the United States, Philadelphia, I believe, but I could be wrong on the exact procedure.
So he was convicted, and supposedly he was hanged. He was executed by hanging, but you contend in the book that he possibly survived. Where did you get that notion from?
And this is one of the best aspects of the whole mystery, Brian, because this is the one where I get to stand up in front of the world and explain my theories and my conceptions about why he wasn't executed that day. And the answer is before us in that concrete tomb. When we have that exhumed, and we will, I'm just waiting for the funds to come in. It's a very expensive procedure, the legal procedure, and then the actual operation. I've been told the Smithsonian will want to take possession of the remains to see that it's done right, that it's not a quote-unquote Geraldo Rivera episode on TV, which, and I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of Geraldo Rivera. That's not why I bring that up, other than people identify with that when I use it. And they want to supervise the comparison of those remains, the DNA, with my tissue. So, one way or the other, we'll be able to say it was him or it wasn't. But the reason why I don't believe it is the New York Times covered, after his alleged execution, for quite a while, this Holmes curse, Brian, where anyone that bothered Holmes in his arrest, in his trial, in his supposed execution, either died or suffered terrible misfortune, and the number of people involved reaches 40. The New York Times was fascinated with this and put a reporter on it who concluded that it was obviously something supernatural. Well, I tended to go the other way, and I wanted to work it backwards. So I started looking at the procedures that were used at his execution that day, and they were strange, to say the least. I'll just give you an example.
Please do.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania law requires an autopsy after the death. Holmes bought it off. He bought no autopsy from the judge. He had hired Pinkerton guards to monitor as the body came down. It was not to be inspected. It was lowered into a coffin and covered in concrete. First time ever done. It was then delivered to a graveyard which had a 10-foot hole waiting. He bought 2 grave sites, not just one. and that was filled with concrete once the coffin was laid on top. And then the guards stayed there 3 nights to make sure the concrete hardened before anyone could rob the grave. Just over and over and over again, the story goes about this strange execution and handling of the body. I tried to put that together with this Holmes curse, and my conclusion, and I can't prove it, is that Holmes was not executed that day.
I look at it in a couple different ways, Jeff. I say, looking at the paranormal-wise of this supposed curse, what's more likely, a paranormal, a ghost haunting and haunting people, or a master manipulator getting his way out of prison and silencing people who could talk against him? Just looking at it in that respect, I think that to me, it seems almost obvious. And on top of that, I don't think it's a reach at all to say that he may have even had a chance of mastering faking his own death, because I believe one time he tried faking his own death for an insurance claim. On top of that, with his partner, he killed his partner to fake his own death. And he didn't get away with either of those, but it's particularly the first one when he tried faking his own death. But a genius like Holmes, who rarely made mistakes, I would imagine he would learn from the few that he did actually make. So this was probably one of them. He finally got caught for faking another person's death, and he probably learned from that on how to eventually maybe fake his own death. And I wouldn't be surprised if he probably realized, being almost superhuman intelligence, most likely he was probably going to get caught one time, so he would need to think of something how to get out of there.
My idea, Brian, is that his behavior in his past episodes was cluttering his lifestyle. It was starting to be too much. He knew he needed to have a clean slate. I think that's why he allowed himself to be arrested. I think that's why he fired his lawyers and conducted his own defense at trial. I think that's why he was not upset. The New York Times wrote he didn't seem upset at all when the conviction came from the jury and the judge. I think he knew what he was doing. My image, and obviously this has nothing to do with evidence or history, but I tend to think of the Silence of the Lambs, Brian, and Hannibal Lecter when he is in jail, and the FBI agent is visiting him over and over, and how he plays chess with her to obtain the result he wanted. Now, you consider Holmes in prison, waiting with that IQ of his. Do you really think that IQ of his was simply going to give up? I don't see it. I don't see it at all.
Yeah, and to me, I ask myself, how could this happen? How could someone realistically fake their own death? And then I think about this one saying that pretty much answers everything. What's the answer to 99% of all questions? Money. This man had equivalent of millions of dollars in today's money. Is it not such an outright thought to think that he probably paid someone off at the time to do so? I don't think so. On top of that, he talked about in his interviews while he was in jail how his face started to change, how he started taking on this satanic face. I think that was almost like a cover story to say, if someone ever pointed out, well, why is his face changing? Well, he himself said that his face was changing inside his own jail. So this man was smart. He thought about almost every single angle. That's the way I look at it.
And Brian, he selected the reporters who he would be interviewed by, which at the time was unheard of. He edited their articles as far as those changings of his face. He played the game like a master. Here's a man that was refusing all interviews. Then, all of a sudden, he calls the Hearst, well, he doesn't call, he notifies the Hearst Corporation that he'll do interviews. And he wants them done like this. This is exactly the rules that will be obtained. And then he wants this amount of money, which was a huge amount of money at the time for these interviews. He needed the cash for him to buy off his guards and the attendees in that prison before the execution.
I didn't even think about that. Why he did the interviews to get the money. Wow, that's a great connection right there. I didn't even think about putting it all together. But a lot of what we're talking about here is conjecture. Do you have any solid proof that says he survived?
No, except the answer is in the concrete. I mean, we will know yes or no. I'll have to go back on your show one day, Brian, and say, I'm sorry, everybody, I was a complete fool. Before I get to say, I told you so. I told you so. So the answer is there. It's not like Jack the Ripper. We have the answer. We just need to exhume that concrete, and all I need is the cash to do it.
Have you thought about Kickstarter?
Yeah, I've been told that 2 or 3 times. I'm pretty much waiting for one of the Hollywood producing outfits to decide once The Devil in the White City comes out, Brian, they're going to want to do that exhumation, trust me.
When the movie comes out, I'm hoping that you are right, that this exhumation will happen, and that you are proven. I want to say this. I want to say that you're proven wrong. I don't want to believe that he kept going and, in all likeliness, just kept murdering and killing people wherever he went. To me, that's terrifying. If you're right.
It would be a sorry note in American history for sure.
What's next? I know you're planning. I believe you're planning a sequel for the book. What? When can we expect that out?
No, I'm not. I might do that. Obviously, when we do the exhumation, if it's not him, I have a killer sequel already outlined that I would write. I also have a couple other aspects as far as having that excavation done at the post office. When the federal government admits they committed a crime by building that post office over the site of those murders, and that the way to make it right for those victims is for us to excavate it and do the proper discovery of what happened there, and maybe put a monument to the victims there. As a matter of fact, I offered to pay for it myself, a bronze monument, and they refused me that. They told me I could plant a tree, and I turned that down. I still don't know why they refused me that, but once we have those events, and once the movie comes out with, they're planning on this movie being seen by billions, Brian. So it's going to help my efforts as far as proving the truth tremendously. So once that, right now I'm writing a fiction, a piece of mystery, a detective novel, which I always wanted to write. When I was a young boy, I used to read Raymond Chandler. I used to read The Big Sleep and The Long Kiss Goodbye. Those 1940s black and white detective novels with the hot dames and the 38s and all that. I used to love those stories. So this is my attempt, Brian, to see if I can write when it's Bloodstains self because of who I am. All right, I'm the great-great-grandson of the most evil man that may have ever lived. There's an aspect to that. It's called platform. This book is about my writing style and whether I can turn a word, and it's a big test for me, and I should have it out. I should have it finished in about a month, so we'll see. I tell you what, I'll send you a copy and you can take a look.
And I will definitely promote that all over the mind's eye. If it's half as good as Bloodstains, you got a winner on your hands, to say the least. I always like to leave the listener off with something active to do. How can the listener help you get this exhumation going of the body in the basement? How can our listeners help?
I just taking part in shows like yours, suggesting to their friends that, hey, there's a guy that's presenting evidence about Jack the Ripper, and he deserves our attention about it. Maybe not our belief yet, but our attention. If I can just get someone to scratch their head and say, you know what, this makes sense. Why haven't we looked at this before? If I can get people to do that, it makes the rest easy, Brian. Then that's all, I go on shows like yours to do. If I can get 3 or 4 people to say, wait a minute, if they've proved that the Dear Boss letter was written by this man, I mean, the expert from the British Library said it was Holmes that wrote that letter. If we've proved that letter was written by Holmes, and if Scotland Yard believed the author of that letter was the murderer of Catherine Eddowes, come on, let's give this guy a chance. Let's listen to his shot at it. After all, he's offered to debate with any author, any law enforcement, any forensic professor in the world, the evidence back and forth. I've given that offer to stand on a stage and debate the evidence, Brian, and you know what? I don't know what more I can do. So shows like yours give me that shot. If I can change 3 or 4 minds, I've had a good night.
And that's definitely how I would recommend the reader and the listener to go into your book, into your talks, just with an open mind. Don't go in there saying there's just no way that this could be true or that could be true. Just go in there with an open mind. And I think you do a great job of guiding and facilitating people to critically think about it, not to necessarily 100% agree with you, but at the bare minimum, think critically about this event that had such a influence on American history and English history and the globe as well.
And you know, Brian, the funny thing, when 2 years from now, when that movie comes out and Leonardo's taking his Oscar, Scorsese's taking his Oscar, they're considering it one of the greatest historical movies ever made, there's going to be a change in true crime literature. They're going to be trying to prove Jack the Ripper was H.H. Holmes, not the other way around, right?
Before I let you go, outside of your book that's coming up, that's your new fiction book that's coming out, what else you got going on? What's next? You got any more lectures? And also give out your social media. Just tell us what's going on in your life in the next couple months.
Yeah, I've got the end of this month, I've got an event in Philadelphia before a group of interested true crime fans. They've asked me to come and swear them in as grand jury and present the evidence. They'd like to take a look themselves, which I got to tell you, those are great events, and I jump at every opportunity for those. Besides, I get to dust off my old briefcase, I carry it in the room like I'm still practicing law. And those are the best. As far as others than that, not many. I know I've got a Discovery Channel show coming out in 2 or 3 months. They've already produced it. It's already done. It has to do with the cemetery in Philadelphia and has to do with this home in Gilmington. So that'll be an interesting one. They've asked me not to discuss that aspect yet. So that'll be coming out. And then I'm pretty much waiting around to see, like everyone else, any new material about, Scorsese and DiCaprio's work, because, those are busy men. For them to stop what they're doing and then produce this movie, it's hard work. And I know I've been told that DiCaprio, this is the role of his lifetime in his mind, and he wants to be able to do the best he's ever done.
I'm going to give you a prediction right now, Jeff. He is going to win that Oscar that's been eluding him, that's been missing this whole time in his career. I think that's like the one piece that's missing, and then this is the one that's going to give it to him.
I'd love to see it.
Jeff, as always, you are just phenomenal. I really appreciate giving us a piece of your time. Give out your social media information one last time before we head out for the night.
www.bloodstainsthebook.com, all one word. Click on it and go through the evidence. We try to put as much as we can in any new material we have that comes up, and leave your comment and let me know what you think. I'm always interested in fair comments. I don't like the ripperologist stuff. They get up and they get angry and they spit at me, that kind of thing. Give me your fair comment. Tell me why you don't think a piece of evidence works. I tell you what, I love considering all new comments and considerations, and thank you for them.
Jeff Mudgett, great-great-grandson of America's first serial killer, H.H. Holmes, and author of Bloodstains, the book. Thank you so much for chatting with us and giving us a piece of your time for the past hour plus, really.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me on, and let's do it again when something new comes up.
We'll circle back then. We'll be back after this. We'll be back right after this break. We're back on the Mind's Eye for our show wrap-up. Again, big thanks to our guest, Jeff Mudgett, author of Bloodstains, the book, and great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer, and possibly Jack the Ripper. All of Jeff's information is now up on our website, themindseyemedia.com. Once more, that's themindseyemedia.com. And while you're stopping by the website, don't forget to check out our next week's guest, Christopher Cooper, energy and environmental policy expert. We're talking about his brand spanking new book, The Truth About Tesla, the Myth of the Lone Genius in the History of Innovation. Catch us then. As always, I appreciate you, the listener, for giving us a piece of your time as well. Join us again next week. This is The Mind's Eye. I'm your host, Brian Turnov, and you're listening to Z Talk Radio.